Hello, everybody. I hope that we are all doing very, very well. Welcome to episode number 23 of the Natural Female Muscle Podcast. Today, we are going to dive into what I'd kind of like to title as the truth about longer off seasons, because I think that there's a lot of, I suppose, like fear or worry or anticipation that sometimes comes with the idea of taking a longer off season, taking, ultimately longer time away from the stage in order to grow as a competitor. And I definitely don't think that they are anything to be feared in the situation where they are needed. I think that there's something that we can benefit from absolutely using, but also just having more understanding of as well, so that we can manage those phases as best as possible and also to ultimately enjoy them as best as possible too. And this is definitely something that I notice when, say, I'm having a consult call with, a new client, and maybe I, bring up the idea of taking a couple years before, they step on stage or they next step on stage. And that can sometimes be something that seems like a bit scary. And it seems like that goal is really, really far away. And I think that it's important that, and in those moments as well, when I'm on those calls, that I break that down and I, emphasize the importance of these phases and how we're going to manage them in order to make sure that, they are productive, you're still getting a lot out of them, and just really understanding why we need them based on the goals. So I think, firstly, it's important for me to break down what I mean by a longer off season, because I think sometimes we can see people saying, they're taking a good time away from stage. But in my opinion, I would say that a longer off season is anywhere from 3 years and above from kind of stage to stage. So if you were to look at, say, 2 years from stage to stage, so say 2020 and 2022, you're really only taking like one whole year off of competing in that time frame. Whereas if you were to go 2020 to 2023, then that's where you kind of have 2 years off. Because if you think about it, 2020 you're competing, 2023 you're competing, you'd really only be having 2021 and 2022 to grow. So that's kind of where I'd look at things on the higher end. And obviously I suppose there's no limit on this. Sometimes you see people taking even longer, maybe not intentionally, but I think that when we look at from a true competitive standpoint of somebody intentionally taking time off, and I mean this in the sense that they're coming off stage and they're going, okay, I'm in an off season, rather than taking time away from bodybuilding, or taking time away from bodybuilding because of having a family or anything like that. I think when we look at set off seasons, usually you see people doing that for anywhere from 3 to kind of 6 years at the upper end, of like really, really taking time away to improve. So that's where I'd kind of set my circumstance on that. Of course, like for me personally, I feel like I'll maybe refer to some things in my own journey throughout, because I can relate to this a lot. I am currently 3 years into my off season. It will be 5 years for me from stage to stage when I next get on. So I'm kind of at that, I suppose I've passed that middle point, but now I'm at a stage where it feels really close. It feels really close to me getting on stage again, because ultimately I will be utilizing a lot of 2024 to settle my prep for 2025. And this is something I will go into when I talk about the lengths of these off seasons, and how long we maybe think they are compared to how long they actually are. But I can relate to a lot of the things that a lot of people maybe feel when they go into a long off season, and how we have to make sure that we can manage those. So the first thing that I think we should address is obviously like why do we need to take a longer off season, which is basically taking a long time away from prepping. That's what we're talking about. Those times that you're taking away from, yeah, sure, you might still be dieting, but you're not getting to lean body composition, like lean. You're not going to be getting anywhere probably within 15 to 20 pounds of your stage weight, most likely. So the main circumstances is obviously so many different reasons, but the main ones are going to be, one, needing time to just literally add on tissue, whether that be for your class, whether that be for a new class, whether that just be for general improvements, whatever it may be. You just need more muscle. So you need time off to gain a good amount more tissue, which for any athlete, we know takes time. female athletes especially, yeah, we take a good amount of time to put tissues on, especially compared to males. It's going to take us a good amount of time to see some big improvements. And of course, this can vary depending on genetic responses as well. So some people might be able to go season to season and just massive improvements, whereas other individuals need to take more time to actually come away from that lean set point, sit a little bit heavier, be able to make those improvements, and to also be able to like hold on to those improvements as well and sustain them. Because sometimes what you see is people will come away and they might look like they've made some good improvements, which maybe they have. Sometimes it might be a case that it's just that fullness regain that you get post prep or post diet that makes you look like you've instantly progressed so much. But sometimes it is, like genuine progress. But then if you're entering, a big prep straight after that, sometimes you don't have the ability to actually like hold and sustain that tissue that you've just added. So having longer periods where you can actually really hold that tissue is really important. So that's the first thing. The second thing is allowing for more muscle maturity. And I think that kind of ties into that last point where, as much as we talk about, like holding and sustaining that muscle, kind of relates to allowing that muscle to mature and to actually like stick around. And sometimes you see people who do sometimes maybe prep a lot, they don't ever see that like really hard, dense look because they've not had the ability to like really hold on to that tissue and literally let it mature. But of course, the biggest thing that comes into play with muscle maturity is literally age. So time off is more time getting older and having a mature look. And that's actually one of the biggest reasons for me as well for taking this time off is like one, it's just needing more size because I was very, very, very small at the back end of my prep in 2020. And I actually like lost a bit of muscle towards the end of that prep. But I also was just really young and, to be competitive with my genetics, I need more time, and that's going to vary from person to person, also within the realms of what they want to do. Some people look incredible at younger ages. So I'm always really mindful that I don't ever say, if you're young, you have to take this period of time because I've seen some young athletes this year who look incredible. And I just think that's amazing to see stuff like that. I think ultimately you think, oh, you never know what they look like if they took even more time, but that's exciting. That's something for them to see in the future. But for me personally, like you have to view this in your own, circumstances. Like I didn't have big, round, full, muscly muscle as like an 18, 19-year old. Like I'm probably never going to be like big and round and full, but I know that I'll be able to have that kind of hardness and maturity as I get older. So that's something that I need the next time I step on stage in order to just look more muscular. It's having the muscle, but it's also being able to present condition of that because I just couldn't do that when I had that lean, just immature look, which often sometimes looks a bit softer. Like sometimes people can look or be as lean as they can get, but they don't look as lean as somebody else because they just don't have that hard, more granite type look to their physique. And it's why a lot of masters competitors look so granite, is it's just time. So there's the maturity aspect. I think then moving away from like pure physique side of things, there's other benefits, of course, of taking longer time away from stage. I think that you get the benefit of really falling more in love with the process of bodybuilding itself, which sometimes if you've, say, just done your first prep or you've competed back to back for a good period of time, you maybe haven't had the time yet to really just spend a good stint bodybuilding and maybe developing a lot of skills outside of a prep circumstance that are going to be really important and that will ultimately transfer into your next prep as well. So, taking time away from that, away from prep, away from dieting to actually just like enjoy what is bodybuilding, which is growing, training, actually building your physique, building your body rather than just dieting. So taking time to actually do that is important. Like that's really, really important. And of course that comes with so many other benefits as well of like, for example, being able to build self-confidence and being able to, pursue more of like your passion, and whether that be in bodybuilding, outside bodybuilding. And this is maybe not necessarily part of, the reasons why I'm going to talk through taking longer off seasons in this podcast. But there are also the circumstances of maybe needing to take time away, as I, alluded to earlier, when it comes to maybe life circumstances. Say you are like getting married, you're moving, you're starting a new job. So many different things can mean that you want to take time away from prepping, or you're building your career. Like there's so many different things. And of course, there's health reasons as well. This is probably a big one for females and is often one of the biggest ones that I will take into consideration when I look at an athlete's timeline is, where they're at in terms of like mental health, in terms of their physical health, and of course, when we're looking at their hormonal health and where they're at in terms of, having a regular health cycle, or as a male as well, where are your hormones, like where are they in range, like have you actually had testosterone in range, and has your like T3 been healthy for a good period of time? If not, probably need to take some time away. So there's definitely a few different things to like look at when we're looking at the circumstances that you might want to take. I think that when we go through this episode, we're mainly going to be touching upon, the physique development side of things, or like your bodybuilding process development, rather than just touching upon, health, or touching upon, lifestyle, because I suppose that's a personal choice rather than, looking at the face for purely improvements. But I think when you've then made that kind of decision, or you're really thinking about it, you do have to still consider like a few things. Like, firstly, I think you have to appreciate that this time is not for everyone, and it's not suited for everyone. So this is when, say, like I mentioned at the start, if I'm speaking to a client on a call, or even an existing client, and we're talking about when they want to step on stage, like, even if from my perspective I can say, yeah, sure, you benefit from taking a good few years off, and really making some improvements, not everyone is going to benefit from doing that, whether that be for their enjoyment of bodybuilding or for their progress in bodybuilding. So when we're looking at, like I said, this time away, it's like we're looking at taking this off season to actually build, like actually be productive, actually use this time to grow. So if I'm saying, cool, we're taking a 3-year off season, like that is an off season where we're like actually really working on like making as much progress as we possibly can do. For some people, having that period of time is actually going to be less productive. And I think this is for a few different reasons. I think firstly, you have to look at where somebody is at in their training career. So I think that talking to somebody who is maybe at like earlier stages, like in their 20s, saying like, cool, let's take a few years off, that's way more inviting than somebody who is, say, like in their 40s and wants to, crack on with the final few years of their competing career, or wants to get on stage, whatever the circumstances are. Like, the improvements that you're maybe going to make at that point as well are going to be far less compared to maybe the improvements that you're going to make from the ages of like 18 to 37. You maybe don't need to be taking so long away from the stage. And it's why sometimes you do see a lot of like masters competitors competing a little bit more frequently, because they kind of have the ability to do so, and they want to. So, preferences is really important there. You also have to look at the fact that for some people, taking longer times away from the stage is actually maybe going to be less productive for them. So certain individuals might find that taking 3 to 5 years away from the stage is going to lead for them to get into phases where they're no longer really being productive with their work. They're no longer being really productive with their bodybuilding process. And basically, variables just start to slip, like they lose vision, they lose focus on the phase, they lose focus on productivity. And that's understandable. Not everybody wants to be 100% in it all the time, because bodybuilding means different things to different people, and that's totally okay. This is where you just look at the individual circumstance and you go, okay, so for this person, maybe if they actually competed every 2 years, or they compete in 2 years, what we're going to see instead is we're going to see a really damn productive 12 months ahead of us where we really grow, and then we can prep again, rather than them getting 3 years into an off season and starting to really sort of slump off, and also really losing their confidence, or really losing their vision or their purpose or whatever it is. So you have to take all of these things into consideration. And then, on the other side of that, when you're looking at, say, somebody later in their career, you also have first timers. And me and Tiara talked about this on the last episode, where maybe we wouldn't really recommend such a huge time for somebody in their first ever season, because it's really important to get that experience of the prep. If you want to hear us talk about this, I'd probably go back to the last episode, because I don't want to repeat everything that we said. And Tiara said some of these things so eloquently, like put together, how she talks through them as well. And getting that experience is super important. But also, I really am very careful with finding the balance for first timers with the amount of time that they do take, because for some younger athletes, yes, it's great to take some time. And I think that if you can take time, you enjoy taking that time, you're just having a good time, there's no rush to compete, amazing. But if you're the type of individual who finds that you're kind of building yourself up to taking 5 years and getting on stage in your first ever time and smashing it, that's a lot of pressure. And you've still not built that skill of prepping, of dieting, of getting into stage condition. And you're still young, you're still doing that first prep. And I think that putting a load of pressure on that first prep can be really, really, like, ultimately just have a negative effect, because mentally, physically, you're just going to be a bit of a mess probably by the end of it. I don't think that taking a really, really long time is always the best approach before you do your first prep. So there's a lot of different considerations to make when you do undergo this. But I think that, now we've obviously gone through why we might want to take it, considerations you need to potentially make. But let's say that we're now in a position where we've gone, you know what, for me, for my circumstances, I want to take an amount of time. And I suppose I can maybe use my example along this. So, like I said at the start, for me, I got to the end of my prep in 2020. I stopped off stage and I was like, okay, cool. I want to be a lot better. I know I want to do this pretty much forever because I love it. I've had an amazing prep. I love training. I love this. I've got to the end of the prep and I'm sick of it. I'm sick of being small. I'm sick of not being able to train well. I want to grow and I just want to spend a really good amount of time doing this so that when I next step on stage, I know I've made some good improvements and I'm at a better place in life where I know I'm ready to get after it. I've matured mentally and physically to really handle my next phase of my bodybuilding journey. And I actually originally planned to only compete in 2023, which would have been this year, which is crazy. And then I ended up actually extending it to 2025, because I realized that I wanted more time to grow. And also just with where I was at with my life, my career, it didn't really work out for me to have prepped this year. Like I wouldn't have been in the best position to prep. Like I'm very focused on coaching and so many other things that I'm doing in my life that I'm happy waiting a couple more years, and it really, really doesn't affect me too much. But those are the decisions that I'd made. And you look and you go, wow, 5 years, and the amount of people I speak to, it shows that say that is crazy. Like everyone says, wow, that's such a long time. Like, how do you cope with so long away from the stage? How are you feeling? Are you worried? Do you this or that? And this is what I'm going to get into now when I talk about the truth of these off seasons, because there's a lot of misconceptions. There's a lot of misconceptions, and there's a lot of things that we need to understand to remove that fear. And this fear is often, how long it's going to be. This is such a long time. Aren't you going to lose your groove? Aren't you going to, not be productive over that time frame? Is it too long? Like I hear a lot of people saying that is, no, you're taking too long, just too long away from the stage. And I don't think you can ever be too long, too short, too right, too wrong. It's individual dependent, but there's quite a few reasons that we need to go through to talk through why these should not be times that we should fear, and why we need to understand them, and how understanding, like I go through with so many things, understanding education is often the root of, us being able to actually appreciate something for what it gives us, and to then, as a result, make the most of it. So I'm going to go through a few reasons that I think are, like some very important things for us to like understand when we're talking about the truth of these off seasons, and reasons why we shouldn't fear them. So the first thing, and the first reason, probably above anything else, is, this time is everything. There's no reason to fear a time that's needed. There's no reason to fear a time where you're going to make the progress that you need. Like, what is the purpose of you taking this time away? It's so you can improve, it's so you can build more muscle, it's so you can be a better athlete. Enjoy the time that is necessary, take the time that is ultimately necessary. No, if you step off stage with the same feeling that I did when I stepped off stage, which was, oh my God, I cannot wait to get growing again. I cannot wait to build upon this like shell of the girl I've become at the end of this prep and to really make some epic improvements and show myself what I can do, then you will look forward to that time. You will look forward to it. Like, most people who really love their training as well will love these phases, because you come out of it and you go into this off season, you're like, oh my God, I'm going to feel strong again in the gym. And this is a really big benefit of having the longer phases as well, is because when you have a longer off season, you have the ability to push up body weight quite a lot more than what you might be able to do in a shorter off season, because you're not so close to a prep. So, like, to put into perspective, at the start of this year, so from my biggest push, which was from the end of 2022 to the middle of 2023 of this year, so you can say that's kind of like the midpoint. So I was 2.5 years into this like off season. That was where I pushed my heaviest to 148 pounds. Now, I'm not going to be pushing anywhere near that heavy now across the remainder of this year and across 2024, because as I start to get toward the end of 2024 to start 2025, I can't be 148 pounds. I can't be that heavy, because I can't start prep that heavy. I can't be, anywhere near that body weight, because I can't be losing, up to 50 pounds within 12 months of stepping on stage, because that's a massive fat loss journey to go on. So I can't be doing that within the time constraints that are close to a prep. But I can be pushing that heavy when I'm, still 2 years away from a prep, when I'm 24 months away from a prep, because I have the ability then to, come down to lighter set points and spend time then at lighter set points. So you get the ability with these longer off seasons to run phases where you can push body weight quite aggressively. You can get to those pretty uncomfortable and pretty like heavy, softer spots, but the spots where you're going to get really damn strong in the gym, the spots where you're probably going to make the best progress you have ever make, which, unlike in, like I said, in shorter off-season phases, you probably don't have the ability to do that, because say you're only taking a year off, you push all the way up to really, really high body weight. Like, say I did that after my prep in 2020, and then I was competing again in 2022, I'd have had, like I said, 50 pounds to like come off, maybe 60 pounds, which is ridiculous. Like, that's not a prep, that's an intense fat loss journey that shouldn't really be, done in that time frame. So that's where you really, really have that benefit of, using the time for what you've got it there for, which is to grow, which is to make amazing progress. So that's one thing to consider. A second thing to really understand here is that when you go in these phases, and this is one thing everyone fears, but you have to really, really, really understand this, you will not see the progress that you're making all the time. You probably won't see it truly until you come down into next stage condition. You're going to get glimmers. You're going to get glimmers of progress when you do a mini diet, or you're going to be able to, psychologically remind yourself that the progress is there when you see the progress in the gym. But the actual physique progress is not going to show like day by day, week by week, month by month, maybe even 2 years, 3 years in before you prep, might not even see it all there yet. But when you come all the way down, you will see it. And this is why you have to know, this is why I said, for some people, these phases don't work, because, mentally they're just challenging beyond the point that's actually productive for that individual. But I do think that if you can create immense amounts of trust, you'll get so much out of these. So you have to really have so much trust in yourself and in the process here. If you're eating hard, training hard, you're going to be growing hard, and it will all be there. So it's a real test of character. Like, it really is. It's a real test of, your trust in the bodybuilding process as an athlete, your love for the process as well as a bodybuilding athlete. And I really think that, in my opinion, if you can go through these phases, you will also have a lot more success in your next prep. Like, yes, there's always going to be difficulties, but even something that I've noticed after spending so long like growing is that, diet phases in comparison to like growing is so easy. Like, yes, you have the challenges of feeling tired, but you see progress like week on week. It's crazy, and you build up a lot of mental resilience to like trust different processes, which is extremely, extremely important. So I think that if you can go through those phases of having to build that immense trust and having to have just focus on a real like long-term process, you will see a lot of success in your next press. And like I said, even just the resiliency that you kind of build through that's just like cross transferable skills that will have an immense impact, along with of course just the general skills that you build over taking more time away, going through pushing phases, going through diet phases, etc. So that's the second thing. A third thing, which is something I think I've really kind of been able to gain myself through this phase, which I maybe wasn't expecting, was not necessarily just like the love for the process, because I think I always had like no love for bodybuilding, but a love for the process maybe deeper than I realized. But being able to go through these longer stages without attachment to your physique or visual outcomes is really, really, really important. And I think that it teaches you a lot because, like I said, this is something that everyone says is, you go into these longer off-season phases and it's like, oh, you're going to be spending so long away from being lean, you're going to be so uncomfortable, you're going to be so insecure. And I think that that's a very like shallow way of almost like looking at bodybuilding and looking at life in general, is kind of assuming that we can only be happy when we're lean or when we're seeing us being smaller or whatever the way that you view that is. But I think when you spend so long away from focusing on being lean or focusing directly on your physique, you spend more time focusing on your actions, you spend more time focusing on training, the things that you do on the day to day, and actually paying attention to the things that like actually make you happy. And that's something that is not just great for bodybuilding but transfers into all areas of life. You begin to appreciate your body more through different phases and through different ways that you feel, and rather than just focusing on how you look all the time. And I was way more fixated on the way that I looked before I went into this off season. I was, struggled a lot more with being heavier. I was far more impacted in terms of happiness based on whether I was lean or not. And what I've been able to really appreciate through spending more time being heavier is being like, and I say heavier as in like being a healthy body, like kind of off season weight, is that like this is like my body, and my body changes at different stages. And I really love my body at all stages that I'm in, genuinely. And that's something that I didn't have before, and I'll happily admit that. I've gained a much, much, much greater appreciation for myself, and for what my body and mind are capable of doing throughout multiple different stages. And one is not necessarily better than the other. Like, I'm not a better person because I'm leaner, I'm not a better person because I'm heavier. I'm always going to be myself, and I'm always going to be able to develop upon myself. So you gain this ability, and a lot of people who've been through these phases will know what I'm talking about. Some people who've maybe not been through this are probably thinking, Loz, what on earth are you talking about? But it's something that you really, 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 really gain through taking yourself away from that fixation of, you know, the way that you look and having to step on stage and having to do this and that. You gain these incredible skills and this understanding of yourself. And like I said, I think kind of tied into the previous point with having that trust and, maybe not seeing, instant dividends. It really teaches you something that I found has been very cross transferable into multiple areas of life. So I think that if you can appreciate that, maybe going into that's not something you have right now, but that's something you're probably going to be able to really work on across this phase. Like, that's amazing. That's not something to fear. Yeah, it's maybe something that feels uncertain at this point in time, but that's something that you're really going to be able to now like build upon and, grow going ahead over these next few years. And that's exciting. And I think that's important, especially as a female. I think it's really important for us to spend times away from that. Like, I've spent most of my life up until these past few years fixating my self-worth on so many other things, on, beauty standards and on what I think my body should look like. And I've really been able to come away from that. And that's been like absolutely amazing. So that's something I know I've gone off on a bit of a tangent about, but that's really, really, really important. So those are three things that I think are kind of like, I suppose, benefits of these longer off seasons, but things that you need to go into understanding that like they're there. These are things that you can work on. These are things that you are going to be able to really appreciate in this phase. So don't fear them, embrace them, and take them on board. So that's three really important things. But this fourth point, when it comes to longer off seasons, is probably the most important one that you need to know when you think that you're taking a long time away. And that is that these long off seasons are nowhere near as long as you think. Nowhere near as long as you think. So many people will say, I've had, 3, 4, 5 years off, and, it's been so long. And yes, like it's a long time, but how long are you actually spending growing in that time frame? How long of that time frame is actually off season? Like, not that much, really. Like, I can give you my example. I obviously competed in 2020, so that was September that year. I had a good few months to recover from that. I would say I was properly recovered from that prep by February, March. So it was like 6 months recovering. I've since then ran a diet phase in the end of 2021. I ran a diet in 2022 and I ran a diet this year. So all in all, that's been, I think it's like 34 weeks of dieting. And then I will run 2 diets next year. And then I will diet leading up to my show in 2025. So all in all, I think it works out that despite having, that 5 years from stage to stage, it's only actually like 2, maybe 3 years worth of actually like growing, might even be 2. Like the time frame is so minor because you're going to have mini cuts. You're going to have pre-prep diets, especially if you're setting up your prep really well, which is probably what you will do if you're taking a longer off season. You're going to likely have a good 10 to 12 week pre-prep the year before, and then your prepping itself will be 6 months long. Like the time that you're actually taking to improve is not that long, and it will fly by. Like really think about it, like especially if you're really on it, and most people are not really on it when the off season for the full period of time. So if you're thinking I'm going to be really really on it, like the weeks that you actually have in the productive surplus are like a lot fewer than you think. And this is why actually having the timeline and breaking these things down is important, because you can not only keep a track on where like your vision is going, but you can actually look and go, oh shit, like I've actually not got that much time to improve, or I've got really I've got 50 weeks to get after it. And you can make the most of those weeks, because those weeks will just fly away from you. They will, especially if you're busy. Like I can't believe how fast this time is going, and I'm sure so many people are going to be like, well, you've still got 2 years to go. But as I said at the start, that feels like it's coming around in no time. I've just finished my last diet. I've got a good 5 or 6 months until we'll probably do a little bit of a tidy up at the start of next year. And then I'll be starting my pre-prep diet next September. So in 12 months time, really, I'll be starting my pre-prep, which basically when my pre-prep starts, that's kind of the start of my prep, because it's the first phase of my prep. So I've got 12 months to go until I'm really kind of like in it. So I've really just got this next year to make my next real big pushes of improvement. So that time just really, really does kind of like, it can get away from you if you're not careful. And I think that you have to have a lot of appreciation for, okay, yeah, this is a long time, but that time is still so valuable. It's really, really valuable. So there's a good few things that you can hopefully kind of take away from that when you're maybe considering like, oh, it's a long time, or am I going to lose my groove, or this and that. And you know what, like the truth is, like I said, what is the truth of these off seasons? Like they're hard. They come with their challenges. They are difficult. They're not for everyone, but they're also going to pay you massive dividends, and they're extremely precious. Like the time is long, but that time is still precious. That time still counts. So don't take that for granted. I think if you can complete these longer phases and you can complete them well, that's massively going to show the next time you step on stage. It always does. If somebody takes time off and they really work in that time that they take off, they always come on stage looking like a different athlete. And if that is the goal that you're working towards and you're taking this seriously, then you absolutely shouldn't be afraid of those. You should embrace those phases. But I think there are a few, I suppose, tips to take away from this. If you are like maybe finding something difficult, and if anyone ever wants to let me know like any things that, like specific things, whether it be body image or whether it be self-doubt, or things that creep up on this, like let me know, and I'll always love to do maybe a deeper dive episode on those ones as well. But a couple of tips that I think have definitely helped me along these phases, I would say setting short-term goals along the way is really important. So setting, goals based on a 6-month basis or a weekly basis or a monthly basis or a yearly basis along these timeframes is really important. So you can look at this based on, your phases in the off season when it comes to um, that whether you're in a growing phase or in a diet phase, and you can set little goals along those, whether it be, develop the skill of, mental resilience in a diet, or be better organized or improve my routine, or it could be, I want to get to this body weight by this time productively, or I want to pull this off the floor by this time next year. Whatever it may be, setting those short term goals is really important. And this is where continually looking at the breakdown and the purpose of every phase is so, so, so crucial. So if you don't have a timeline for your off season, make a timeline, not only to make sure that the phase is productive and to make sure that you're not just basically neglecting whenever your next prep is, because like I said, that time will go away from you. It also really helps you to understand what you're doing week by week, what you're doing month by month. You're not just thinking, oh, I'm in a never ending phase of growing, because you shouldn't really be in a never ending phase of growing. There should be phases mapped out for growing, for dieting, making sure that all those phases are productive. So make sure that you have that breakdown in front of you, and make sure that you're continually referring to it, as and when is obviously needed. And the last tip, which is probably one of the biggest things that helps me in my own kind of off season, is keeping myself involved in bodybuilding. Because one of the biggest things that so many people suffer from when they take longer times off is that they just feel like they're not a part of it anymore. They feel like they've kind of, like I said, they've lost the groove. They're not really, involved, or they maybe feel like they're not important because they're not competing. And that's definitely not the case. And especially from, career standpoint as well, you can still be a great coach. You can still make great progress when you're not competing. And I was definitely worried about that. I was thinking, how am I going to build my business if I'm not getting on stage and I'm not lean? But that doesn't need to define, me as a coach just because I'm lean. And you see that a lot, where people think I have to compete to, show that I'm a great coach, show that I'm this and that. And that's not true. And if anything, actually leading from the front and, taking time that you'd, commit to your athletes, and say to them, you should take time off, and showing that you can do that is, if anything, more important. So, having the acknowledgement of that and keeping yourself involved. I think if I didn't do all the things that I do, and I didn't, even if you don't work in the bodybuilding industry, like going to shows and still like supporting others, and going to expos or whatever it is that allows you to still feel a part of that, like keep yourself involved, keep yourself there, because that helps you to keep the vision going. It keeps you in that community, which I think, if anything, is one of the biggest things that we miss when we're not competing. Is we miss like the camaraderie, we miss being around other people. And I think the more that you can, be at shows and be around others and just be a part of that experience is so important. And that's the biggest thing that I love, because I feel like, yeah, I'm taking time away, but I feel more involved in bodybuilding than I ever have been before. And that's amazing. So those are probably the main things that I wanted to talk about today. I know it's a little bit of I say it's a short I'll say it's a short episode. I've been talking for 40 minutes, which is great loss. So yeah, well done if you've obviously stuck it out to the end, guys. But I hope that you've been able to take a good amount away from this one. I thought it was kind of an important one to touch upon, because I've been talking about this, a lot myself, to AJ with my own journey, but also when I'm maybe having consults with people at this time of year, we're always discussing like when they're next stepping on stage, or when they want to step on stage, and having those discussions. So hopefully this has been a helpful one, guys. If you have listened and got to the end, I appreciate it so much. All the support off of these episodes is incredible. I know a lot of people really enjoyed the last episode, which was awesome, and just to even have, you know, a few people listen to these episodes and be able to take something away from them is all I could ever ask for. So if you are listening to these and enjoying them, thank you so much. If you have enjoyed it, please make sure to, you know, like share it on Instagram, tag me, tag the podcast, because I absolutely love seeing it. If ever you have any feedback or any messages, please let me know, because I love to hear it. You know, if you like the episode, if you didn't like the episode, please let me know, because I want to just bring what you want to hear, and like, these are for you. These are for like you guys to get what you want to hear out of it. So if there's something I can be doing better, just let me know. But yeah, if you have enjoyed it, like I said, give us a share, give us a like and a subscribe on YouTube, a share and rating on Spotify. And yeah, I'll be back with another episode next week, guys.